Our next speaker I've worked with him last weekend, known him for some time. He's got a fantastic presentation for you about Copenhagen. So please give a warm welcome to Torben from Bloxhub.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt. And thank you for having me, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to be here and telling you a little story about a city not far from here, who some 10 years ago made up its mind about changing, not necessarily the world, but be a little bit, just a microscopic part in the puzzle of actually changing the world. So far we've been talking quite a lot about urbanization. We've been talking a little bit about, Carl mentioned that, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17, and we are very, very much committed to that where I come from. So allow me just to, in this introduction here, tell you a little bit about the story of Copenhagen, the city not far from Malmö, why Copenhagen decided back in 2012 to become the world's first carbon neutral city in the year 2025, so we have still 5 years to get there. How far have we come? What are we focusing on? Etc., etc. That will be my story to you today. I am normally not a civil servant from the City of Copenhagen. I'm the CEO of Bloxhub, which is a new urban innovation hub in downtown Copenhagen. We got a picture up here of the place. Very, very briefly, what we do is threefold. We run a space, a co-working space of some 120 companies now, 700 people coming in and out every day. We have a community of only companies related to sustainable urbanization. So the co-working space here is reaching out to any company within the built environment that wants to create change within the urban setting, within the urban environment. And first and foremost, what we do there is to create partnerships in order for us to make the different companies to one another. Because we truly and wholly believe that the world is becoming too fast and too networked for any company, small or corporate, to have all the answers inside. So therefore, if you want to create change, if you want to innovate and come up with new solutions, you have to collaborate and cooperate in new ways. And that is what we are urging the companies to do. We do it within these 8 themes. So just to give you a very, very brief idea of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about sustainable urbanization, we are focusing on these 8 different areas. Livability, urban mobility, resilience, sustainable buildings, which we're talking very, very much about these days. Design, of course, circular economy, tech, and governance. All these areas to do with how to actually create better cities, how to construct better buildings. So, coming back to the story of Copenhagen. Now, it all began back in 2010. The politicians got together saying, hey, we want to reach out. We know the demographics. We know that by the year 2050, 2/3 of the world's population will live in urban areas. Copenhagen being a microscopic city in that relation, of course. What can we do? How can we push the urban agenda? How can we reach out to new solutions, to the public, to the politicians, in order to create a better city? So the ambition was to create the world's first carbon neutral capital by the year 2025. And the story there is actually, as stated up here, threefold. We want to create better quality of life. As it's been said in the introduction, it's all about creating a better world. It's all about creating a better world for our kids, the ones we are leaving behind. Of course, we need to create a better world for them. So we want a better quality of life. We want to create cities that are safer. We want to create a more diverse and more livable city. What we need is knowledge and innovation and investments, of course. And what we need to focus on is carbon and the way we are producing and the way we are consuming carbon these days. But also, we want to do it together with the people. So we don't want to create smart cities for the sake of tech and smartness. We want to create livable cities for the sake of the people. So it's people for cities. That is the overall goal we're trying to create. So when we're talking about smart cities, in our view, it's only partly to do with tech. Smart cities are cities that reach out to the people, asking them what are the key challenges in your everyday life. That is the smart city. And as you know, those of you who travel to Copenhagen back and forth, we're actually able to swim in the harbor now. Back in Bloxhub, where I rule, so to speak, we've just created what we call the 12-12 Club. And the 12-12 Club is for any one of the 700 people staying in our co-working space who wants to jump with us in the harbor every day at 12:12, we're free to do so. Don't tell the authorities, because actually it's not allowed. But anyway, we're doing, and it's fun. But it's also this. This is also a smart city. As you know, Copenhagen, just like Malmö, is flat as a pancake, so we can take our bikes to work. 50% of any commuters in Copenhagen are using their bikes, and their bikes like this, their box bikes, to work. So that is also an answer of what is a smart city. Now, the overall challenge is, of course, to meet this. We have a rising population size, even though Copenhagen is not as large as Mexico City, as Tokyo, as Sao Paulo, and other global cities. But we have an ambition of, by the year 2025, to actually come down to a big zero of carbon emissions. So back in 2012, the politicians and the business industry got together saying, hey, we want to do this. So they created a climate implementation plan of 3 periods. We're over the first one, we are more or less over the second period, ending up in 2020, and reaching out to the last and third period, closing up in 2025. So what we did was to descale, or to detail, the climate implementation plan into this diagram. This is the climate plan, and this is the focus of the climate plan, with energy consumption, energy production, mobility, and city administration as the 4 key areas. And as you probably figured out already, of course, it's the energy production and consumption which take out the biggest leaps and the biggest parts of this plan. But just take a look at this diagram. If you zoom out a little bit, what comes to your mind? What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you look at this? Maybe that it's a hierarchical organization chart, etc., etc. But when I had a look at it the other day, I said, hey, this is not a diagram, it's a business plan. It's a business plan for the construction industry. And it's a business plan for the supporting industries supporting the construction industry, just like you are, just like BIMobject is. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, in my view, the biggest ever business opportunity for the construction sector and for the companies supporting the construction sector. We are going to create buildings, we are going to create cities that are reaching out to these drivers and these goals. So take a look at it, energy consumption, for example, retrofitting, low energy in new buildings, smart homes, solar panels, like Stefan talked about, smart cities, wind turbines, etc., etc. Look at the city administration. The city is using itself as a main driver, creating new buildings, retrofitting in intelligent ways, using transport systems that haven't been seen before. So in my view, this is a business plan. It's the biggest ever business opportunity for the construction center in order to create more livable cities, sustainable cities. Now allow me just to detail this a little bit more, because when we are zooming in, so to speak, on the energy production that will produce CO2 reductions coming close to a zero in 2025. Of course, we're talking about biomass in combined heat and power units and wind turbines. So this is sort of the action plan of the overall climate and CO2 emission reduction plan coming out of the City of Copenhagen. So we're focusing on 2 things, biomass in combined heat and power units, and wind turbines, and all the new things coming out of these focus areas. If you look at energy consumption, we're focused at energy efficiency, which is, as I said, very, very much a business opportunity for the building industry and the AEC industry overall. And we're talking about flexible energy consumption. These two things are primarily a driver for the construction industry in order to come up with new innovative solutions in order to reach the overall goals of reducing the CO2 emissions to a big zero in 2025. Looking at the mobility area, which is the third key focus area of the overall implementation plan, we're looking at public transport. We're looking at to become the world's best cities for cyclists, and we're looking at traffic, of course. So transport, public transport, traffic, car-free zones, new collaborative attempts, sharing systems, car sharing systems, etc., all coming out as a positive ingredients in creating this CO2 emissions plan when we talk about mobility. But allow me just to step back a little bit on the energy consumption and production side, because as it was told earlier by Stefan, yes, there will be an off-grid future looking outwards to the rest of the world. But I think supplementing that, of course, is the ability for us here in the Nordic region, and taking Copenhagen as an example, to actually become much more efficient in energy production and energy consumption if we look at how the district heating systems have been created over the years. So we have had a focus on creating one big infrastructural system in the greater Copenhagen area, focusing on which are plans and efforts that goes back to 1925, to be honest, but coming up with the result that 98% of all heat consumption is coming through or led through the district heating system. So that in itself creates a tremendous infrastructural advantage in pushing through new renewable energy consumption and, of course, renewable energy production methods. That is a great advantage, and we have to stand up on top of that advantage. Allow me to focus a little bit more on the mobility side. As I stated earlier, we love bikes in Copenhagen, and we will come up with new ambitions for pushing that goal even further. The major goals for 2025 will be that 75% of all trips in Copenhagen are on foot, bike or public transport. So more or less no cars. They will not be banned, but we will have to limit the amount of cars in inner city areas as much as possible. 50% of trips to work or school in Copenhagen will be on bike. We are very, very close to that target, and I'm very sorry that I can only give you updated figures going back to 2016. We haven't updated the latest figures yet, but as I was told, the 50% mark has been reached, so we are all clear on that. 20% more passengers use public transport, 20 to 30% of all light vehicles run on new fuels, and 30 to 40 of all heavy vehicles are also using new fuels. So that is very much quite an aggressive strategy for transport, for transforming the energy sector, the mobility sector in this case, which to a large extent now stands on the shoulders of the Danish government's new ambition and target set when the new government came into office last summer, stating that by the year 2030 we will have a reduction of 70% CO2 emissions, which is of course based on the experiences coming out of the Copenhagen case, which I'm focusing on here. So the road to the Copenhagen 2025 case will be partly a very, very strong political commitment set by the City Council, very much a question of collaborating, and Bloxhub, which I'm representing, is very much a stakeholder in that collaboration, reaching out to sort of a cross-public-private platform in order to come up with the best and most sustainable solutions. And it's very much to spread the word, not only city to city on a national scale in Denmark. Denmark is way too small to that, but we can do it, and we will do it. But also reaching out to a far more global audience. For example, the C40 network. Now, the C40 network is actually, nowadays, it's the 98, I think, most sustainable cities in the world. They got together last October in Copenhagen discussing how can we create a new Green Deal. There were very, very many US mayors there. For some odd reason, no Republican mayors, only Democratic mayors, but they all, of course, agreed on pushing the agenda at a city scale. So even though we have some national challenges, I would say, not mentioning any names here, definitely at a city scale, we are pushing the agenda highly. One last note about what Copenhagen has learned from the experiences so far is also to offer the city as a lab. I won't go through all these cases, I haven't got time for that because I'm coming to a close now, but experiencing your city as a lab, reaching out to the industry, reaching out to the construction industry in order to invite in for collaboration using the city as a lab. So, making Copenhagen smart, wrapping up, is about sustainability, focusing on growth and the quality of life as the main driver. Very, very much initiating innovative partnerships around developing technologies, which is an open invitation to you, of course. The use of data can't be underestimated at all. Using the city as a test lab, as I just said, for new technologies. Setting up social targets, including the people of the city, is crucial. Bearing in mind that technology in itself is not a goal, but it's a means to a goal. But without technology, you couldn't make the construction industry more efficient. Without an efficient construction sector, we couldn't create more livable cities. So that's what we're trying, and I hope you'll listen to that in a matter of actually taking on board the learnings we've had in Copenhagen, and invite you, and of course I invite you to come on board at Bloxhub so we can discuss this in much more detail. Thank you very much for listening.